Sometimes my customers will call me up and they'll say, hey, Grinding Duck, we've got this funky issue on our part where we're getting what you might call spiral marks, what you might call swirl marks, what I call barber pole marks. And barber pole marks are when your workpiece gets these little lines on them. And the distance between those lines you can calculate if they're genuine barber pole marks. I call it the cylindrical grinding lead. Some people call it the helix pitch. Some people call it the screw lead. But if you want to know if you have genuine barber pole, just take your traverse velocity and divide it by your RPM. So in this case, if I've got a workpiece and a wheel, this one's quite thin compared to most of them, and this is not very long, but let's go with this. This guy, this wheel, as he traverses, let's say he's doing double doink grinding, doink, zzz, doink, zzz, doink, zzz, doink, zzz, as opposed to single doink grinding, doink, zzz, zzz, doink, zzz, zzz. Same concept though. Every time this workpiece makes one revolution, that wheel will have moved over a certain distance, and that is our cylindrical grinding lead, and that is the distance between the barber pole marks. Okay, now, what causes this? In fact, if you look in the grinding literature, there's not much written about this, and I don't think anyone has a really good understanding of what causes this. But one theory, and I think this is a reasonable theory, is that what we have is a wheel that is not perfectly aligned with the axis of the workpiece. So the axis of the wheel and the axis of the workpiece are not parallel. The axis of the wheel is slightly cocked. This can happen if you crash a wheel. This can happen if you have bad alignment. So what happens is, instead of grinding like this, you're grinding like this. Now you might not think that's a problem. However, imagine at some point, let's say on the night shift last night, Joe crashed the wheel. He didn't tell anybody, but now my wheel, instead of being lined up like this, is like that. Now I exaggerate it, but it doesn't take much. Now when we dress the wheel, the dresser is usually mounted on the bed of the machine or somewhere else. So what's happening is this guy is now cocked, but he traverses the dresser like that. So imagine if we're traversing the dresser like that, we are going to end up with a grinding wheel that has a shape that looks like the regulating wheel in a centerless grinder. He's going to look like that because we're not dressing the guy this way, we're dressing him like that way. So we've got a wheel that looks like that. Now the edges of the workpiece, the edges of the wheel are now going to dig in to the workpiece. So as I traverse, my workpiece is going to experience a digging in from the wheel every time he makes one revolution. So actually these are going to be closer together. He digs in, he digs in, he digs in, and we get spiral marks. Or if we look at it this way, if this is our wheel, and let's say we're grinding a plastic straw, now we're no longer grinding like this, we got a wheel that's cockeyed. So now we got an additional problem to where, in a sense, we don't even have a line contact, we have point contact. Although the dresser is going to give us a little bit of line contact. So now we're traversing like this with a wheel that looks like a reg wheel in a centerless grinder, and these guys are going to dig in to the workpiece. So we end up with a spiral or barber pole on our workpiece. So that's what we'd like to see. But if we take a top view of that, this is actually what we're grinding with. That's not a pretty situation. And actually we have a wheel that looks like the reg wheel on a centerless grinder. So those little corners are going to dig into the workpiece, and they're going to give us our barber pole marks. Now, how do we deal with this? Number one is you can fix the alignment of your machine. You can hire a guy to laser alignment and get that alignment back in place. or you can cheat. And there is a quick and dirty cheating solution that'll work some of the time. And what you do is you take that bad regulating wheel geometry, which you're digging in, and you just relieve the sides of the wheel a little bit. Doesn't take much, but just true it away. Of course, this is exaggerated, but we're going to true it away so that those guys are not digging in as much. And if the problem is minimal, this is often good enough to get away with it. If the problem is severe, then it's not good enough to get away with it. So it depends on the situation, but you relieve those sides of the wheel. How do you do that? Well, you should be safe and do it in the machine. What some people do is they'll just come over and get a white stick or a dressing diamond and just go or do it by hand. Not a good idea. You lose your finger. A better idea is program it in. When the dresser traverses across, have the dresser just go and just kind of dress in that relief. It's not a pretty solution. It's not a scientifically nice solution. It's kind of cheap, quick and dirty. But what we're going to do is we're going to relieve those points. Now we still don't have a great, perfectly shaped wheel, but we don't have that incredibly sharp corner. And then when we go to grind, we're still going to have some barber pole marks, but the barber pole marks are not going to be quite as pronounced, and hopefully we can get away with it.